Hello and welcome to Figure Skating Mess. In February 2022, 15-year-old Kamila Valieva went from being figure skating's most brightly shining star to being caught with a positive doping test in the middle of Olympics. And this was only a day after she had made history, being the first female to land a quadruple jump at the Olympics, and thus helping her Russian team to win the team medal. And here begins the messiest doping scandal in figure skating history, arguably in the history of sports, because the doping sample, it wasn't taken at the Olympics, it was from Russian nationals 2 months prior. But it wasn't fully examined and revealed that it contained a prohibited heart medication until in the middle of Olympics. And despite having a positive doping test, Kamila was allowed to compete in the singles event only days after, with the argument that she was under 16 and thus a protected person. Moreover, her explanation for having this heart medication in her system was that her grandfather used it and she drank from the same glass as him. And since then, it has taken 2 years for CAS to finally release a verdict on the issue, and during that time, no one has gotten their Olympic team medals. But now, Kamila seems to be facing a 4-year ban. But there are many questions regarding this doping saga. First of all, why did it take 2 months almost for the results at the Russian nationals to be examined? And why weren't her doping tests after that competition positive too? And can a heart medication really improve your results in figure skating? And can you get it in your system by drinking from the same glass as your grandpa? But most importantly, if Kamila was only 15 and thus a protected person at the time, why is she the only one being punished and not the adults and coaches that were responsible for her? I will delve into all of these questions in this video, where I will go through this doping debacle in chronological order, trying to make sense of it all. Let's begin from the very beginning with some quick background information on Kamila herself and the coaching team behind her. Kamila was born in April 2006 in Kazan, a city in the region of Tatarstan in Russia. She began figure skating at only 3 years old, and she showed immediate talent. So when she was 6, her family moved to Moscow so she could get better training opportunities. And in 2018, at 12 years old, she switched coaching team to the infamous coach Tutberidze, the coach who has been dominating the women's singles for a decade, and Kamila seemed to be yet another bright star that would come from that training camp. When Kamila started competing at junior international competitions in the 2019-2020 season, it was with great success. She won both the Junior Grand Prix and Junior World Championships. The following season it was COVID, so there was no international competitions, but then begins 2021-2022 season, and Kamila is a first-year senior, and she begins it with a bang. She sets several world records, she wins Russian nationals, she wins European championships, and she is regarded as this wonder child who has the perfect combination of flexibility, natural musicality and tenderness, as well as a very high level of difficulty in technical elements. She can do both quadruple jumps and a triple axel, which are the hardest element in regards of jumps you can do as a woman in figure skating. And she absolutely dominated this season. She was the clear favourite to win the upcoming Olympics at only 15 years old. But this young age was actually to her advantage. See, she comes from a coaching team that is famous for 4 things, you can say. First of all, they do an insane amount of run-throughs. of their programs. Secondly, they monitor their skaters' weight multiple times a day and are extremely strict with how many grams they put into the body. They are very restrictive with water and use a lot of power shakes. Thirdly, their jumping technique relies heavily on low body weight so they can have quick rotations in the air. And fourth, they tend to peak at 14, 16 years old and then start falling apart at 70s due to career-ending injuries. And in actuality, no single skater from the Tutberidze team has been able to continue skating in women's singles after turning 20. No one. And she has produced so many young medalists in women's single skating, but none of them has been able to continue their competitive career as a women's single skater after they turn 20. And this has coined the phrase the ethereal expiration date, which is said to be around 17, where everyone falls apart. And most people think it is because of the previously mentioned insane amount of run-throughs in combination with such a restrictive diet and a jumping technique that is very hurtful for the body in the long run. And when the students come into puberty, they inevitably start gaining weight regardless of how restrictive you are. And then the students start losing their jump because it's so heavily relied upon a low body weight, and also all of the years with just intense training start to really take a toll on the body, and thus comes career-ending injuries and inconsistency. So the young age of 15 was actually a big advantage for Kamila because she was in her prime compared to her main rivals from the same team that also were going to the Olympics, Anna Sherbakova and Alexandra Trusova, both 17 years old and thus right at their expiration date, and both had been plagued by injuries during the season. And now we have finally arrived at the Olympics, and it begins with a team event where Kamila is the biggest star. She makes history by landing the first ever quadruple jump by a female at the Olympics, and she leads her Russian team to win the gold medal. However, right before the medal ceremony, a news is broken that there has been a positive doping test that has made so that the medal ceremony can't take place. But the media can't say whose positive doping test it is because it regards a protected person. And people quickly make the conclusion that it has to be Kamila Valieva because she's the only one who can be regarded as a protected person since she is the only one that is under 16 years old. And hell breaks loose. Remember, she is the star of the figure skating competitions at the Olympics. All eyes were already on her and she was so praised, to the next second being caught with illegal substances in her body. But quite quickly it was revealed that the doping sample was actually not taken at the Olympics, but rather at Russian nationals 1.5 months prior to the event. And it was regarding a trace amount of a heart medication called Trimetazidine. And Kamila's defense for having this substance in her body was that she had been drinking from the same glass as her grandpa, who uses apparently that medication. And of course there was an avalanche of questions regarding these statements. One of the main questions being, why did it take so long for the sample to be examined? I mean, 1.5 months. So let's begin by looking into that. yet. As previously mentioned, it was taken at Russian nationals at the end of December. But since Russia's state-organized doping at their own Olympics in Sochi 2014, where they switched out and tampered with samples, Russia are no longer allowed to analyze their own doping samples, which is quite understandable. So the samples had to be sent to another country for analyzing. And that country was in fact my own home country, Sweden. However, in a statement from WADA, the relevant sample was not flagged by RUSADA as being a priority sample. And therefore, the laboratory did not know to fast-track the analysis of the sample. And RUSADA is Russia's anti-doping agency, and I think what is most important to highlight here is that RUSADA is to blame for the test result being late, because they did not adhere to the custom to mark the test as a priority. And hence it was impossible for the Swedish lab to know that the sample should be prioritized. Remember, this was also during COVID, with an unusual amount of tests having to be examined. And I would also like to add an additional explanation to the delay, and that is that it has to be sent to Sweden physically, and that takes, of course, time, especially since the Swedish Postal Service is notoriously slow since a bad deal we did with Denmark. Thank you, Maud Olofsson. So that probably added some days too, but overall it was very, very unfortunate that RUSADA did not mark this as a priority. Otherwise, it would have been able to be analyzed before the Olympics, and Kamila would not have had to go through this in the middle of the event with all eyes on her, and Russia could have been able to send another skater instead, such as Yelizaveta Tuktamysheva. Moving on, another frequently asked question was that how come that a doping test after Russian nationals, such as Europeans and the Olympics themselves, were negative and not containing any illegal substances? And why wasn't she caught doping before this at previous competition where they also were conducting doping tests? Personally, I find this very normal because, well, everyone has negative tests until they have a positive one, right? And athletes that use doping are always balancing on a very thin line, taking just the right amount that gives them a performance enhancements, but not too much that it is to be detected. And what happened at Russian nationals was probably that she was given a bit too much, and it hadn't been washed out of his system before the doping tests. This does not mean that she did not take illegal substances before and after Russian nationals, just that it was the exact right amount to go undetected. I want you now to remember what I mentioned in the beginning of this video about Team Tutberidze being notorious for weighing the skaters multiple times a day. They have a method to weighing them 3 times daily and keeping a chart of the students. And yes, I know having low body weight and trying to maintain that is, of course, a critical factor in rotating jumps in figure skating, but that can be achieved through just healthy diet and training. And it seems a bit excessive needing to know the exact change in grams of your students' body weight like multiple times a day in order to just maintain a low body weight. It seems like a lot of resources that is kind of fruitless at the end. However, needing to know the exact amounts your student weigh up to the single gram is very useful in order to optimize the intake of performance-enhancing drugs in order for them to go undetected, because that correlates to the body weight. And a trace amount being found actually fits very well into the knowledge we have about Team Tutberidze monitoring the students' weights. And it actually, to me, makes a lot more sense why they put so much resources into doing this. Now, let's take a deeper look into what trace amount of a drug was found in Kamila's body. The drug is a heart medication called Trimetazidine, and many fans quickly came to her defense, arguing that, well, a heart medication couldn't possibly help Kamila with performing, right? How would that help with artistry and flexibility, etc.? So even if she had this drug in her body, it would not affect her performance at all. Well, figure skating is more than artistry. It is a sport heavily relying on stamina and strength. So let's once and for all examine what Trimetazidine actually does and if it could help in figure skating competition. Scientifically explained, Trimetazidine affects the heart by increasing glucose metabolism at the expense of free fatty acid metabolism, thereby enhancing efficient use of oxygen. Basically, in common English, it makes the heart work more efficiently. It increases the blood flow, which in turn delivers more oxygen to the muscles of the body. And it is believed that this can help with physical endurance. And when it comes to figure skating, this would actually be very useful because it would allow skaters to practice for a longer amount of time at a higher level. And remember when I mentioned in the beginning of this video that Team Tutberidze is notorious for having way more run-throughs of the program than any other teams. This is something that potentially couldn't be made possible by using this heart medication. And being able to practice a program more times makes you more secure when performing it at competitions. So even if she did not have the drug in her system at the Olympics themselves, they would still have given her an advantage since they were in her system when she practiced before the Olympics. Because practice makes perfect, and if you are able to practice better, you are able to compete better. And I think also it's important to point out that even if this drug somehow wouldn't increase the performance at all in figure skating, it is still illegal. Trimetazidine has been prohibited in sports since 2014, and it is banned both in and out of competitions. Thus, it would still be cheating according to the rules. Having stated that, yes, Trimetazidine would actually give Kamila an performance enhancement, how did the drug get into her system? The interesting thing is that when this was revealed, Kamila and her team did not deny there being a drug in her system. Instead, the team doctor, Filip Świecki, who we will examine in more detail later because he is a very sketchy man involved in several doping scandals, Filip Świecki instead had to immediately come up with some theoretical explanation of how the drug could have entered Kamila's body. Initially, the explanation apparently involved Kamila's dog, but that was quickly abandoned because it was, well, highly unlikely, and instead they used the story that she had drank from the same glass as her grandfather, who uses this heart medication. And this was apparently an explanation that arose during a cast meeting. So, could it just have been an unfortunate accident, and should everyone in sports just avoid visiting relatives using heart medication? The president of the Banned Substance Control Group, Oliver Caitlin, says that the explanation of contaminated water could be possible if the grandfather had used a powder of Trimetazidine and mixed it into the water. However, Trimetazidine is a drug that typically comes in capsules, and you thus ingest it by putting it into your mouth and then swallowing it with a glass of water. Therefore, it would be very, very little chance of any trace of the medicine being mixed up with the water that Kamila apparently drank from. Furthermore, US anti-doping chief Travis Trigard claims that the amount of Trimetazidine found in Kamila's system, 2.1 nanograms per milliliter, are very consistent with the tail end of an excursion if a full dose of Trimetazidine was taken a day prior. With that information in hand, it seems unlikely that Kamila got the drug into her system by drinking from the same glass as her grandpa. Instead, it seems more probable that she actually was deliberately given this drug as a full dose by probably someone on her team. That was some answers to some of the main questions that was asked during the day right after the scandal broke. But it was also another very immediate questions that had to be answered. Should Kamila be able to compete in the women's single event that would take place just in a couple of days? Surely she couldn't be allowed to compete with a positive doping test, right? Well, to everyone's confusion, she was allowed to compete with the explanation that she was under 16 and therefore a protected person, and that not being able to compete would cause irreversible harm to her. And this decision was made with the precaution that should she win a medal, there would be no medal ceremony. And needless to say, a lot of fans were furious with this decision and argued that this would cause irreversible harm to the sport to let a person with a positive doping test compete. It would show that the sport does not care for keeping it clean, and it must be such a slap in the face for all the clean athletes who are now forced to compete against someone who has been openly caught cheating. Additionally, it would most likely also be no medal ceremony because Kamila was the favorite to win gold. And then no one will get their medals until the investigation was closed, and that would also cause irreversible harm to all of the athletes. Because even if people, of course, felt sorry for her and realized, well, a 15-year-old has probably not taken these drugs by her own actions, they were probably given to her, maybe without knowing, she still had them in her system. And rules are rules and they are to be followed, but still she was allowed to compete. And what happened at the competition itself? She won the short program, delivering a triple axel, although with a step out, and it wasn't as excellent as at the team competition, but she seemed to keep it together. Then, at the freak program, all the bad media attention seemed to got the best of her, and she fell several times, ended up in 4th place overall, without any medal. Kamila was, of course, inconsolable immediately afterwards. There are very heartbreaking pictures of her with her coaches, and you feel for her because, of course, this was a dream of her that she has worked for all of her life, and now it was turned into a nightmare. And many fans argue that letting her compete was actually the thing that caused irreversible harm to her because of all the negative attention she faced, which anyone with a brain could foresee would happen because she was the biggest star caught doping at the Olympics, and yet she was allowed to compete. Of course she would get immense negative press. And that is something that a 15-year-old cannot handle. So it was obviously very harmful for her mental health, and it would probably have been for the best if she was just sent home immediately and been allowed to heal from this experience. But since Kamila did not win any medal at the singles event, a medal ceremony for that competition could at least take place, where 2 other skaters from her training camp, Anna Sherbakova and Alexandra Torosova, won gold and silver, which left a bit of a bitter aftertaste, because at least I wondered, why would a 15-year-old have illegal substances in her body and not the 17-year-olds that were training in the same camp as her? It made me question how clean those athletes were, even if they, until this day, have not been caught doping. It still makes you wonder, and it cast a shadow of doubt over the whole event. Regarding the team event, however, the medals could not be given out until the investigation of Kamila's doping case had been resolved, and that took a little bit of time. First, RUSADA should do their own investigation, but in November 2022, over half a year after the scandal broke, WADA accused RUSADA of stalling, and the case instead was handed over to CAS. And later, RUSADA came out with the verdict that Kamila was not able to prove herself without any fault, but that the fault was minimal, so that a warning would be enough, apparently. Anyways, back to CAS. Their hearing was postponed and postponed, and challenged and postponed, and challenged and postponed again, until finally in January 2024, almost 2 years after the scandal broke, a final decision was finally made, and that was to ban Kamila for 4 years from the day that the doping test was initially taken, namely the 25th of December 2021. And all of her competitive results from that day forward should be eliminated. This means that the results from Russian nationals and Europeans and Olympics should be cancelled, and those behind her should be moving up in the results and receiving medals. It is also important, I think, to highlight here that the length of the ban allows her to compete at the next Olympics in 2026, if Russia as a nation is eligible to compete there, of course, and if, her body still allows her. I would also like to add that during the CAS hearing, Kamila and her team brought forward yet another story of how the medicine apparently came into her body, and that was that apparently her grandfather usually cut his medicine on the same shopping board that he cut strawberries on, and that he later made a strawberry dessert from and served Kamila. This, I think, might be the most ridiculous thing in the whole story, because why would Kamila eat a strawberry dessert just the day before the competition with a strict diet that we know that she's on, and how meticulously they monitor everything that she takes in? Why would she eat a dessert the day before a competition? But let's move back to the punishment itself. A 4-year ban. Personally, I think a 4-year ban is an unreasonable punishment for a doping case regarding a 15-year-old, especially when you take into account that her young age made her being allowed to compete at the Olympics with a positive doping test because she was a minor and a protected person. But somehow this didn't matter when her punishment should be decided. It is also a very long punishment compared to suspension people usually get from having their first positive doping test. That's usually around 2 years. And I am personally of the belief that the punishment is so long and harsh because that during the time that the investigation has been ongoing, Kamila has been allowed to compete at Russian domestic events. Of course, she has not competed in any international competitions, but that is not due to any restrictions specifically for her. It's rather due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and therefore no Russian figure skaters have been competing internationally. So Kamila's experience competitively after the positive doping test has been exactly the same as the other Russian skaters. When it comes to competing, she has faced no punishment at all from the Russian Federation. And when watching Russian domestic competition, it is blatantly obvious that those in charge of figure skating in Russia do not care at all that their top athlete might have been cheating. The commentator introduced her as the Olympic gold medalist. even though everyone knows that she does not have an Olympic gold medal, because no one has any medal from that team event because of Kamila's positive doping test. And it was very unlikely that the Russian team would be rewarded with a gold medal when the investigation was finished. There is absolutely no recognition at all that Kamila might have done something wrong, or at least that the adults around her have done her something wrong by potentially giving her performance-enhancing drugs. And as a Swedish viewer, this is completely opposite to what I'm used to. We are a country that has very few doping cases, luckily. And when they occur, the public immediately turn on the athlete. The athlete is not respected anymore. They lose all their fans because doping is basically despised in Sweden. And of course, I think the Swedish public, including me, would be more lenient towards a 15-year-old. We would not particularly blame her, but we would be suspicious and we would be very harsh on the coaches in charge of her. And that's absolutely not the case in Russia. She is the favorite among the federation, the commentators and the public. And I think the 4-year ban is due to her being allowed to compete for 2 years in Russia, not facing any repercussions from the Russian Federation. And I think Carls wanted to make a statement that this is not okay. Unfortunately, Kamila is taking all the consequences, and the adults around her is facing 0 consequences. And the remainder of this video will actually be dedicated to those who are in charge of her. But before that, I just want to make a quick mention that the Olympics team medals have now been handed out over 2 years after the event actually took place. They had a ceremony at the Olympic Summer Games this year in Paris, and it was at least good that the athletes got, a celebration for their performances. There were people there, and since Kamila's points were erased from the competition, the gold went to USA and the silver to Japan. However, they only erased Kamila's results. They did not bump up the athletes behind her. Just to clarify, in the team event there are 10 teams, and the best female skater gets 10 points, the second best get 9 points, the third 8 points, etc, etc. And since Kamila got 10 points, logically you would think that when her scores are erased, they would bump up the girl in second place to third place. And thus the girl who previously got 9 points would be receiving 10 points. And the girl who got 8 points would get 9 points, and so on. So everyone would in total get 2 points more because of there being both a free and a short program. The ISU did not do this. They simply erased Kamila's result and everyone else stayed the same, resulting in Russia actually winning bronze and not Canada, which would be the case if everyone was bumped up a notch. And the Canada Federation is of course furious with this. They have challenged this, so no one has gotten the bronze medal still from this event. I just cannot believe how poorly all of this is handled. They couldn't even do this right. But let's move on and look deeper into the coaches and medical staff that are behind Kamila and the whole Russian Figure Skating Federation in general. The person who was ultimately in charge of Kamila was her coach, Tutberidze. And according to Russia's national figure skating team advisor, Tarasova, everything goes through the coach in Russia. And only the coach can give a student a pill. And Tarasova basically said that Etere should take responsibility for this and admit she made a mistake and gave Kamila the wrong pill. Data herself, though, claims that she does not know what her students are given by the medical doctors. Only the medical doctors know that, so let's investigate these medical doctors who are hiding in the background. Mainly a man named Filip Shvetsky, who follows the Russian team at every competition and who's always in the background of every photo. Filip Shvetsky began working with the Russian figure skating team in 2010, and it was with immediate positive results. In the following Olympics 2014, Russia had immense success. Among many things, they won their first ever gold medal in the women's discipline, which they then continue to win in both 2018 and 2022. So who is this man who has made such wonders to the Russian figure skating team? He isn't your typical sports doctor who specialized in sports medicine. No, rather, he specialized in reanimatology, the science of reviving people who are clinically dead. You heard me correctly. Clinically dead, meaning their blood has stopped circulating and they have stopped breathing. It's an interesting choice to hire this man as a team doctor, isn't it? And it becomes even more suspect when you realize that 3 years prior to working with a figure skating team in 2007, he was actually given a 2-year doping suspension after providing banned intravenous injections to Russian rowers. Then in 2014, he sought to have patent for xenon gas, which was so performance enhancing, it was immediately banned by WADA. This man, the medical doctor of the Russian figure skating team, is specialized in reviving dead people. He has previously been banned from giving athletes doping, and he has also sought patent for a gas that was immediately banned by WADA. And now a 15-year-old girl he was medically in charge of has been caught with doping too. How is this man being allowed to continue working in figure skating in Russia? Why is there no investigation regarding this man who is so blatantly involved in doping and cheating? It is beyond me. I am baffled that nothing is done against him, and it is only this 15-year-old girl who is taking all the blame with a 4-year suspension, while her coach Tutberidze, no suspension at all. And this man, Filip Shvetsky, no suspension at all either, not even an investigation. And of course, these aren't the only people who could be involved in this doping scandal. These are just the ones that are most infamous and we know most sketchy stuff about. But it makes me genuinely sad and worried for the sport, knowing that the team that has dominated women's single figure skating for a decade, that they have been aided by a man who is so involved in doping scandals. And it's only logical to suspect that other skaters have been given performance-enhancing drugs too, because Kamila isn't working on her own, she's part of a system. And every skater in Russia is part of that system too. And I know no one else has been caught doping, but that doesn't mean, once again, that they have been using doping. Also, when you consider that in figure skating there are no blood tests, there are only urine tests. And there are many things that cannot be shown on a urine test that will be shown on a blood test. So I sincerely hope that, first of all, ISU investigate what is really going on in Russian figure skating, especially Team Tutberidze, who also have many training methods that are really concerning, that are possibly made possible by these performance-enhancing drugs. And secondly, that figure skating start using blood samples and not only urine samples. with that being said, what I'm hoping for with this video is that it has made people more aware of what actually went down with the Kamila Valieva doping scandal. But most importantly, that it has made people more aware of the bigger problems in Russian figure skating. So please write in the comments down below your opinion on the matter, and please be civilized. And until you see me next time, take care of each other. Bye!